An inquiry has found Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, should have never been given a job in the police force. The report also states that without a radical overhaul of police culture, there is no stopping another Couzens. Joining me now to give us a rundown of the report and today's events is TalkTV correspondent Holly Hudson. Holly, thanks for joining us. It's a terrible, terrible day, I think, for the police. It's an awful report. There's so much in it that proves how surely somebody should have known about this guy.
Oh, I mean, I've got it here, 350
Unbelievable.
pages of it, and this is only part one of the inquiry. And the ultimate conclusion, as you said, a very bad day, another day of reckoning, essentially, for policing again. The ultimate conclusion, Wayne Couzens should never have even been a police officer. So many damning findings in this report. And this is the public inquiry, so in many ways you might say it's the most serious and significant, commissioned by the government, of course, in the wake of Sarah Everard's murder, Priti Patel, and asking the question, really, how could Wayne Couzens become a police officer? How could he remain a police officer when he had a history of predatory, abusive behaviour and a history of so many serious sex crimes, which I'll get to in a moment.
And much of them going back to before he joined the police, right? And then during the time he was at the police, many times reported to superior officers for various things and awful, conflagrations that he caused and terrible assaults and, series of flashing and all of that. And nobody did anything.
Yeah, there are repeated failings. Lady Elish Angiolini, who led the inquiry, said to spot red flags, spot his unsuitability to be a police officer and essentially halt him from being a police officer as well.
And is the police in the position to give any kind of explanation? I mean, I saw the Metropolitan Police put out a tweet today saying how they were so sorry, but I'm afraid that's not really good enough. They need to, it's all very well for them to now say, oh, we're going to, tighten up our procedures, but, they need to come forward and they need to name some people who didn't do anything, don't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the accountability, isn't it? We have heard them apologise, as you said previously, and we had a statement from Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, today, saying the report publishes an urgent call to action for all of us in policing. We must go further and faster to earn back the trust of all those whose confidence in policing has been shaken. But this is the first part of this inquiry. There's a second part still to come. Work is underway on that, and that looks at the wider culture of policing as a whole, the broader issues around women in public safety that Sarah Everard's murder, of course, triggered. So there will be more for the police to confront soon.
Yeah, exactly right. So tell us a bit more about the history of Wayne Couzens and the sort of rap sheet, if you like, of all the things that he's done.
So, essentially, there are things that we did know in this report. There are things that we didn't know. What we did already know was many of the failings of the police in relation to investigations of indecent exposure, reports of indecent exposure previously. Now, the IOPC, the police watchdog, had flagged those, had noticed those, raised them previously. Kent Police, Met Police, missed opportunities to link Couzens to those reports. He used his credit card, he used his car, he was caught on CCTV. They've accepted that previously, they've held people accountable. We also knew Wayne Couzens had a reputation. He was known as the rapist to colleagues. What we didn't know that emerged in this report today is a number of things. What we didn't expect was just how deviant his behaviour was. He had a preference for extreme porn, tried to show colleagues, shared unsolicited images, sent grossly offensive messages. Also, just how flawed and lax recruitment and vetting processes were. Psychological assessments were missed, weren't made. For example, when he joined the Met Police, Lady Elish Angiolini pointed out that the assessment for him becoming a firearms officer was less rigorous than it would have been if he was a member of the public applying to own a firearm. Information was missed, it wasn't shared, checks weren't done, completely discounted in some senses, but crucially the most significant, I think, Mike, is the emergence today, and this is something that we didn't know. This is what we first learnt today. How many other alleged sex crimes, offences he's been accused of on top of the rape and murder of Sarah Everard, and they're much more serious than we expected. An attempted kidnap at knife point, the rape of 2 separate women, a very serious sexual assault against a child, and further indecent exposures, 8 in total. So damning for the police.
And also, there was hints, whether or not today, that, there could be other people that we don't know about. For whatever reason, they may have been attacked by Couzens and were too frightened to come forward, or they might have actually been killed by him. I mean, it's not inconceivable that he's murdered other people, is it?
Lady Elish Angiolini did point out that there may well be more victims, and unless there is this radical overhaul of police vetting procedures, of the recruitment process, which is what she recommended among many other things, there were 16 in total, then yes, another police officer, another Wayne Couzens could be operating in plain sight.
Yeah, it really is quite extraordinary, because at the end of the day, those of us who have never worked in the police but have known the police over time, I find it inconceivable, because, you know, there are decent police officers. You know, the fact that he was even nicknamed the rapist by his colleagues, and they used to have exchanges of what would be, at the very least, described as very tasteless and horrid messages about other women. Just horrendous. And, you know, clearly that's a culture inside the police.
Yeah, an interesting point again that Lady Elish Angiolini highlighted and made here is that while he wasn't wholly a product of the environment, the culture of policing, it did help his deviant nature, his deviant behaviour and his misogynistic views to flourish.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, Holly, thank you very much indeed for that rundown. That's a very, very large and an incredibly complex report. I'm joined now by artist and Violence Against Women and Girls Prevention campaigner Tashmia Owen and broadcaster and barrister Andrew Eborn. Tashmia, let me come first to you. This is a terrible story. I can't imagine really anyone ever seeing any part of this story all the way through the years that Wayne Couzens worked at the police and not just hang their heads in shame. I mean, I would expect an organisation like the Metropolitan Police to just have a mass resignation kind of wave and just have loads of people hold up their hands and say, because of what I didn't do, this happened.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I really do believe they are beyond reform. What we are seeing repeatedly, the gaslighting, the obfuscation, each and every time exposes the systemic nature of the rot across the UK and the police force.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the rap sheet and the number of red flags, I mean, the one perhaps the most ridiculous for me is the individual, the member of the public who gave the police the name of the type of car he was driving, the colour of the car, the registration number of the car. He had seen him driving around literally naked below the waist. They didn't even bother to question him, and they just dismissed the investigation.
Yes, today I learned that the inspector who investigated, theoretically, this allegation worked with Wayne Couzens' brother. They were in the same unit. And he just brushed it aside.
Yeah. Andrew, let me bring you in. I mean, Tashmia says she can't imagine that this can be in any way fixed, that the police is now endemically just tarnished with this kind of thing. And let's face it, it's not the only case. No. It happens to be the worst case, and it's awful. But do you agree with her? I mean, can they reform the police?
Well, I think one of the most shocking things, Mike, is the evidence, which they basically said was astonishing. One of the statements to the inquiry in 2022 is that even if they'd known about his history, even though they'd known about the horrendous things we've now discovered, they would have still recruited him under that policy. It's an extraordinary report, I mean, several pages, but on page 213, they make recommendations about the change in the recruitment and vetting process. And they make it absolutely clear that if there's any suggestion of any sexual impropriety or whatever, they should stop the recruitment process straight away. That's the concerning thing, is there's a lot of history about this particular case. But looking at the way they do this, and I always say, look, trust comes in on foot, but leaves on horseback. And anything, there are 46,000 Met officers, the vast majority of which are brilliant at what they do, and they have all sorts of things. I know we talk about enforcement and so on and so forth, but this particular case is horrendous. And it's not the only one, obviously, and there's
that's the
third part of the report.
And Tashmia, let me come back to you, because we know that there are many police officers who are still in the force who have been convicted of a series of different crimes, some of them sexual, some of them drug-related, some of them domestic violence-related, and yet the police under Sir Mark Rowley, who said that he was going to clear out the mess, hasn't done anything, has he?
No, this isn't an anomaly, unfortunately. Only yesterday we heard about the failings that led to the brutal murder of Emma Caldwell in Scotland. Only last week we had Cliff Mitchell, the PC, who had allegations of sexual assault against his name before he joined the Met. Due to him not being prosecuted for it, they did not feel it was something they needed to consider.
Incredible. Andrew, what can they do to replenish the loss of trust.
Well,
Because
the first thing they need to do is absolutely root out. There's obviously going to be more cases.
Right.
What this will do is open the floodgates.
Right. I mean, what they've said is that they will change the rules so that if they discover somebody has been found guilty of a particular crime, they will be immediately suspended.
Yes.
Which at the moment, incredibly, they're not.
It's bizarre. As I say, go back to that horrendous statement.
So if you're found guilty of rape in the police office as a police officer, you are not immediately sacked.
It's a crazy system. So they need to look at that sort of stuff. But also, as I say, these sexual offences, and I go back to what we were saying beforehand, any individual identified as having a conviction or caution for sexual offence should be rejected during police vetting. That should happen already.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't.
Right.
And that's the shocking thing about it. And that, to me, was the most horrendous thing. The evidence that in 2022, that even if they'd known about the history, he could still have been recruited, for me is just appalling.
Yeah.
What we need to do is to root everything out. There will be other issues which will come to a forefront. What the police need to do to restore trust, if they can, is act really, really quickly, root out all the evil that's in the police, make sure you get the good in there, and make sure you have a much more rigorous vetting procedure.
Yeah, I think so. Andrew, thank you very much indeed for the moment. Tashmir as well, appreciate your time.